had always been a symphony of the unspoken, a vast, intricate tapestry woven from the whispers of time and the silent testament of forgotten objects. Her hands, nimble and knowing, possessed an almost preternatural sensitivity, a tactile empathy that allowed her to converse with the very essence of decay, to coax fragile beauty back from the brink of oblivion. She was a restorer, yes, but in a sense far more profound than the mere application of solvents and glues. She was an archaeologist of the aesthetic, a whisperer to the wounded, a midwife to rebirth. For years, her atelier in the labyrinthine heart of Florence had been her sanctuary, a repository of hushed reverence where the golden glow of early morning light would often catch dust motes dancing in the air, transforming the workshop into a cathedral of quiet industry. The scent of linseed oil, aged wood, and faint, forgotten perfumes clung to the air, a comforting olfactory blanket that had long defined the contours of her existence. Each brushstroke, each delicate incision, was a meditation, a slow, deliberate waltz with the past, demanding an absorption so complete that the clamor of the modern world often faded into an indistinct hum beyond her leaded glass windows. Elara was a creature of habit, perhaps, but it was a habit born not of rigidity, but of a deep, abiding respect for the rhythm of her craft. Her days began with the gentle hiss of the espresso machine, followed by hours bent over a time-worn canvas or a fragment of crumbling fresco, her breath held, her focus absolute. She spoke little, preferring the eloquence of her hands, the quiet dialogues she conducted with the objects themselves. Her beauty was not of the striking, immediate kind, but rather a luminous serenity, an understated elegance that mirrored the delicate work she performed. Her hair, the color of burnished copper, was usually pulled back in a loose, practical knot, and her eyes, the shade of a winter sky on the verge of snow, held a depth that suggested untold stories and unarticulated musings. She moved with a languid grace, each gesture considered, each movement imbued with an almost ceremonial slowness, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance of the universe, or perhaps, simply, the fragile nature of the art she sought to preserve. There was a certain melancholy about her, a gentle wistfulness that clung to her like a forgotten shawl, a silent acknowledgment of the ephemeral nature of all things, even beauty itself. Yet, even within the comforting confines of her familiar world, a subtle tremor had begun to stir, an almost imperceptible shift in the currents of her being. It wasn't dissatisfaction, not precisely, but rather a quiet yearning for a different kind of quietude, a silence more profound, more encompassing than the muted murmur of Florence. The city, for all its undeniable charm and historical resonance, had begun to feel, in recent months, a touch too vibrant, its cobbled streets a trifle too resonant with the echoes of hurried footsteps and boisterous conversations. She found herself increasingly drawn to images of hushed landscapes, of vast, untouched expanses where the only sounds were the whisper of the wind or the gentle fall of rain. It was a yearning for an unsullied canvas, a space where the noise of human endeavor was less pronounced, where the very air seemed to hold its breath. This nascent desire, initially a mere flicker, had slowly, inexorably, grown into a persistent whisper, a quiet insistence that urged her towards a departure, a migration to a place where the ordinary dissolved into the extraordinary, where the mundane surrendered to the magical. And then, as if summoned by the very intensity of her unspoken longing, the invitation arrived. It was not a grand pronouncement, but a humble, albeit exquisitely penned, letter on heavy cream-colored paper, sealed with a wax impression of a lion rampant. The request was unusual, even for her profession, the restoration of an entire, albeit small, private collection of Renaissance portraits, housed within a secluded palazzo in Venice. Not just any palazzo, the letter specified, but one nestled in a forgotten corner of the Cannaregio Sestiere, far from the tourist throngs, a place where time seemed to have paused its relentless march. The owner, an enigmatic countess of advanced years, desired the work to be undertaken in situ, away from the bustling thoroughfares, in a state of absolute solitude. The unusual nature of the request, the very notion of a Venice stripped bare of its usual cacophony, resonated deeply with the burgeoning desires of Elara's soul. It was an anomaly, a whispered promise of an unsullied experience, a glimpse into a city most only dreamed of, or saw through a filter of vibrant, often overwhelming, humanity. The decision, for Elara, was not one of agonizing deliberation, but rather a slow, deliberate unfolding, like the petals of a night-blooming flower. There was a sense of inevitability about it, as if the threads of her destiny had, for some time, been subtly guiding her towards this very juncture. The notion of Venice, a city already steeped in the melancholic beauty of decay and renewal, stripped of its usual exuberant theatrics, presented an irresistible allure. A Venice hushed by the very elements, transformed by the silent descent of snow, was a vision that resonated with the deepest chambers of her artistic sensibility. It was a canvas awaiting a new interpretation, a stage upon which a different kind of drama might unfold, a drama of introspection and quiet discovery. The very thought of it, the imagined silence, the muted light filtering through snow-laden skies, sent a shiver of anticipation through her, a sensation akin to the quiet thrill of discovering a forgotten masterpiece beneath layers of grime. This was not merely a commission, it was an invitation to a communion with a city often misrepresented, a chance to witness its true, ethereal essence. The journey itself was an exercise in quiet contemplation. The train, a serpentine whisper through the winter landscape, carried her away from the familiar contours of Tuscany, through the Lombard plains, each mile a further severance from the known. She watched the world outside her window transform, the vibrant greens of autumn fading into the stark silhouettes of bare trees, the fields giving way to a monochrome palette of muted grays and browns, occasionally punctuated by the stark white of lingering frost. Her fellow passengers were a blurry tableau of muted conversations and rustling newspapers, their lives unfolding in parallel, yet entirely separate, from her own quiet pilgrimage. Elara found solace in this anonymity, in the silent passage through a world that seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of winter's deep embrace. She clutched a worn leather-bound book, its pages fragrant with the scent of aged paper, but her gaze often drifted, lost in the fleeting landscapes, each passing moment a gentle shedding of the old, an opening to the new. Arrival in Venice was not the usual chaotic disembarkation into a bustling throng of tourists and gondoliers hawking their wares. No, the city had already begun its transformation. A subtle, almost imperceptible dusting of white had begun to settle on the ochre rooftops and the ancient stone, a preliminary whisper of the spectacle to come. The air was still, pregnant with the promise of more snow, carrying a crisp, briny tang that was uniquely Venetian. The usual clamor of the Grand Canal was subdued, the gondolas fewer, their movements slower, almost reverential. It was as if the city itself had received the memo, had chosen to don its winter cloak of silence in deference to the approaching chill. As Elara stepped from the train, her single, elegantly simple suitcase in hand, a palpable sense of peace enveloped her. It was a stillness she had craved, a profound quietude that seemed to vibrate in the very air, a balm to her often overstimulated senses. This was not the Venice of postcards and boisterous celebrations. this was something far more intimate, more profound, a city preparing to reveal a hidden facet of its soul. A small, almost invisible, private water taxi awaited her, its engine a low thrum against the hushed backdrop of the lagoon. The driver, a man of few words and a kindly, weathered face, simply nodded, indicating her seat. The journey through the labyrinthine waterways was an experience akin to gliding through a dream. The usual vibrant hues of the city were muted, softened by the gathering dusk and the burgeoning snow. Buildings, once so assertive in their vibrant colors, now seemed to recede into a gentle blur of grays and creams, their intricate details softened by the diffusing light. The very water of the canals, usually a shimmering mirror of the city's vibrancy, was now a deep, inky black, reflecting the muted sky above, creating a seamless transition between water and air. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against ancient stone, the distant cry of a solitary gull, and the steady, rhythmic pulse of the taxi's engine. It was a hypnotic journey, each turn of the canal revealing another tableau of hushed beauty, another glimpse into a Venice she had only ever imagined in the quiet recesses of her mind. The palazzo, when they finally reached it, emerged from the gathering gloom like a silent sentinel, its ancient facade softened by the nascent snowfall. It was not grand in the ostentatious manner of some of Venice's more famous palaces, but possessed a quiet dignity, an understated elegance that spoke of centuries of whispered secrets and cultivated taste. Its windows, dark and unblinking, seemed to gaze out onto the canal with a patient, knowing air. A small, almost hidden water gate, adorned with a rusting iron lantern, marked the entrance. As the taxi nudged gently against the weathered stone, the driver gestured towards the door, a silent invitation to cross the threshold into this forgotten world. Elara stepped onto the damp stone landing, her senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the air, the faint scent of old wood and the elusive perfume of damp stone. She felt a profound sense of anticipation, a quiet thrill that was not born of excitement, but of a deep, resonant understanding that she was about to embark upon a journey not just of restoration, but of rediscovery, both of the art and, perhaps, of herself. The snow, now falling with a deliberate, feathery grace, began to blanket the city, transforming Venice into a canvas of pristine white, a silent world awaiting its new inhabitant. The old city seemed to hold its breath, ready to unveil its deepest, most profound mysteries under the hushed dominion of winter's enchanting spell. The first few days in the Palazzo d'Inverno, as Elara had silently christened it, were steeped in a profound, almost sacred, quietude. The name, Palace of Winter, seemed to cling to its ancient stones with an undeniable accuracy, especially now, under the unbroken dominion of a continuous, feathery snowfall that had transformed Venice into an otherworldly tableau. The city, usually a vibrant kaleidoscope of sound and movement, had surrendered to a deep, resonant hush, broken only by the muffled shush of her own footsteps on the thick, pristine carpet of white that lay upon every bridge and calli, and the occasional, distant, almost ethereal chime of a church bell struggling to pierce the dense, sound-absorbing blanket of snow. The canals, usually alive with the gentle splash of oars and the low murmur of voices, now lay frozen in places, a dark, still mirror reflecting the leaden, luminous sky, or else a slow, viscous current barely stirring beneath a thin crust of ice. It was a Venice she had never conceived of, a city stripped bare of its customary theatricality, revealing a stark, melancholic beauty that resonated deeply with the quieter chambers of her soul. The palazzo itself was a labyrinth of echoing chambers and faded grandeur, a testament to centuries of lives lived within its walls. Dust motes, disturbed by the rare current of air, danced in the shafts of diffuse light that filtered through the tall, arched windows, illuminating the intricate patterns of the patterned terrazzo floors and the subtle fading of ancient frescoes on the ceilings. The air inside held a unique fragrance, a blend of aged wood, the faint, lingering scent of damp stone, and an elusive perfume of forgotten lives, perhaps the ghosts of long-departed inhabitants. Each room, untouched by the frenetic pace of modern life, felt like a sealed container of history, waiting to yield its secrets to a patient observer. Elara moved through it with a reverence born of her profession, her steps light, her touch gentle, as if afraid to disturb the delicate equilibrium of time itself. She spent her initial days simply being within its walls, allowing the silence to seep into her bones, mapping the unseen currents of its ancient breath, a preparatory ritual before the more intrusive work of restoration could begin. Her solitary existence within the palazzo was punctuated only by the brief, almost spectral appearances of Signora Elena, the elderly housekeeper. Signora Elena was a woman woven from the very fabric of Venice, her face a roadmap of ancient sorrows and quiet resilience, her movements slow and deliberate, like the turning of a tide. She would appear silently, bearing simple, comforting meals, a fragrant minestrone, fresh bread, a glass of dark, robust wine, placing them on a small, exquisitely carved table in the grand salon, and then vanish just as quietly, leaving Elara to her thoughts and the pervasive silence. Their interactions were minimal, a few murmured Italian phrases exchanged like precious coins, but a silent understanding passed between them, a shared reverence for the quiet rhythms of the old house and the profound beauty of the snow-laden world outside. These moments were not interruptions but rather gentle anchors, tethering Elara to the tangible world, reminding her of the continuity of human presence within this hushed, almost suspended reality. The formal introduction to her commission, the collection of Renaissance portraits, was a moment of quiet ceremony. The Countess, a woman of formidable presence despite her frail frame, greeted Elara in a small, sun-drenched antechamber overlooking one of the smaller, snow-choked canals. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to gauge Elara with an almost X-ray intensity, a silent assessment that was both disarming and oddly reassuring. She spoke in a voice like rustling silk, a timbre that carried the weight of generations, outlining her wishes with a concise elegance that left no room for ambiguity. "These are echoes," she had said, gesturing towards the shrouded paintings, whispers of souls long past. "They deserve to breathe again, not as ghosts, but as living presences. You, Signorina Elara, possess the touch, I believe, to coax them back to life." Her words, far from being a mere professional directive, resonated with Elara's own philosophy of restoration, deepening her sense of purpose and connecting her work to a lineage of care that stretched back through centuries. The Countess then departed as swiftly and quietly as Signora Elena, leaving Elara alone with the shrouded forms, the anticipation a tangible presence in the still air. When Elara finally began to unveil the paintings, the silence of the palazzo seemed to intensify, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation. One by one, she peeled back the protective coverings, revealing faces that had slumbered for centuries beneath layers of grime, discolored varnish, and the subtle ravages of time. Each canvas was a dialogue waiting to happen, a story yearning to be told, a puzzle demanding to be solved. Her initial assessments were meticulous, a slow, methodical dance between observation and analysis. She studied the cracks like ancient riverbeds, traced the fading lines of painted garments, deciphered the muted pigments, each detail a clue to the painting's history, its suffering, its potential for renewal. This was the language she spoke fluently, the intricate grammar of deterioration, the silent narrative of age. The smell of old oil paint and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax filled her nostrils, a familiar comfort in this new, unfamiliar world. It was during one of these initial, unhurried examinations, while carefully documenting the condition of a particularly haunting portrait of a young woman with eyes of startling intensity, that she made the unexpected discovery. Tucked away in a small, almost imperceptible cavity in the heavy, gilded frame, obscured by generations of dust and a cunningly carved wooden panel that blended seamlessly with the ornate flourishes, lay a small, leather-bound volume. It was not a book, not precisely, but a diary, its covers worn smooth by untold hands, its pages, though yellowed with age, remarkably preserved. The leather was soft, supple, almost warm to the touch, as if it still retained the faint imprint of a long-departed human warmth. A small, intricately carved silver clasp held it shut, its delicate craftsmanship speaking of a bygone era. A shiver, not of cold but of profound curiosity, traced its way down Elara's spine. The discovery was utterly unexpected, a deviation from the meticulous routine of her work, yet it felt strangely preordained, a secret offered freely by the ancient house. Her professional ethics, usually unyielding, momentarily wavered. This was not part of the commission, it was an intimate, unbidden glimpse into a private life. Yet, the allure of the unknown, the irresistible pull of a narrative suspended in time, proved too strong to resist. With a gentle touch, she unfastened the silver clasp, which yielded with a faint, musical click that echoed softly in the silent room. The first few pages were blank, as if anticipating a pause, a moment of deep breath before the unfolding of a narrative. Then, in a delicate, almost spidery script, faded but still legible, the words began. The diary was written in Italian, a formal, elegant hand from a bygone century, adorned with flourishes and expressions that spoke of a different age. It was a language she understood, but one that demanded a slower, more deliberate reading, a careful deciphering of nuances and archaic turns of phrase. The initial entries were fragments, glimpses into a world of hushed elegance and profound societal expectations. The writer, whom Elara soon discerned to be a young woman named Beatrice, painted a vivid, though often veiled, portrait of her daily life within the palazzo. Beatrice's observations were sharp, her prose infused with a yearning that pulsed beneath the polite veneer of her words. She wrote of the monotonous beauty of the canals, the subtle shifting of light through the grand windows, the rigid protocols of Venetian society, and the stifling weight of expectations placed upon a young woman of her station. There was a palpable sense of confinement, a yearning for something beyond the gilded cage of her existence, a longing for a connection that transcended the superficial. As Elara continued to read, carefully turning the fragile pages, a pattern began to emerge. Beatrice's entries, initially focused on the mundane details of her life, slowly, inexorably, began to shift, revealing a burgeoning, passionate secret. Interspersed with musings on daily routines and societal obligations, there appeared increasingly fervent passages, lyrical descriptions of stolen glances, accidental touches, and the quiet agony of unexpressed feelings. It became clear that Beatrice was chronicling a clandestine love affair, a profound connection blossoming beneath the watchful eyes of a rigid society. The object of her affection was initially unnamed, referred to only by a series of evocative allusions, my guiding star, the shadow that dances in my dreams, he, whose laughter echoes in the quiet chambers of my heart. The deliberate anonymity only heightened the mystery, drawing Elara deeper into the narrative, each page a further unraveling of the intricate emotional landscape of a century past. The sense of an invisible presence began to permeate the palazzo for Elara. As she meticulously cleaned the brushes, prepared the solvents, and mixed her pigments, her thoughts were constantly drawn back to Beatrice's words, to the ghostly echo of a love affair conducted in hushed tones within these very walls. The portraits, once merely subjects of her professional attention, now seemed to take on a new dimension, infused with the emotional resonance of Beatrice's story. She found herself imagining Beatrice moving through the very rooms she now inhabited, a figure of delicate strength, her heart brimming with a forbidden passion. The silent palazzo, once a mere workspace, was slowly transforming into a vibrant, ethereal stage, where the echoes of a past love affair played out in the quiet corners of her imagination. The snow, falling ceaselessly outside, seemed to act as a further muffling agent, deepening the sense of intimacy between Elara and the unfolding narrative, creating a secluded pocket of time where past and present converged in a delicate dance of discovery. The beauty of Beatrice's prose, its lyrical quality and poignant reflections, held Elara captive. The diary became a silent companion, a confidant from another era. She would often pause her restorative work, her tools laid aside, and simply lose herself in the fragile pages, tracing the lines of Beatrice's elegant script, allowing the words to wash over her like a gentle tide. The contrast between the vibrant, almost aching emotionality of Beatrice's entries and the hushed, snowbound reality of the palazzo outside created a poignant juxtaposition, a dialogue between the passionate heart of the past and the serene contemplation of the present. This was no longer just a job, it was an unfolding mystery, a historical romance whispered across the centuries, and Elara, the solitary restorer, found herself becoming an unwitting, yet deeply invested, participant in its silent revelation. The cold, austere beauty of Venice, blanketed in white, was no longer just a backdrop, it was an integral character in this unfolding drama, a silent witness to both the enduring power of love and the relentless passage of time. The story of Beatrice, contained within the worn leather covers, had truly begun to take hold of Elara's solitary existence. As the days melted into a soft, indistinct succession, each one mirroring the last in its hushed, snow-laden beauty, Elara's work became inextricably intertwined with the unfolding narrative of Beatrice's diary. The silence of the palazzo, once merely a backdrop for her meticulous craft, now seemed to pulsate with the echoes of a century-old romance, each creak of aged timber, each gentle whisper of the wind against the leaded panes, seeming to carry a faint resonance of the past. The restoration of the Renaissance portraits, though still her primary professional endeavor, began to feel like a parallel pursuit, a tangible manifestation of her desire to bring hidden beauty back into the light, much as Beatrice's words were doing for a forgotten love story. She found herself moving between the canvases and the diary with an almost ritualistic rhythm, one informing the other, each revealing deeper layers of understanding. Beatrice's entries grew increasingly fervent, painting a vivid, almost breathless, portrait of her clandestine encounters. The object of her affection, finally named as Lorenzo, began to emerge from the shadows of Beatrice's lyrical prose. He was not a man of her social standing, this much was clear, and therein lay the inherent tragedy and exquisite danger of their bond. Beatrice described him with a painter's eye for detail, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, his hands, strong and calloused, yet capable of the tenderest touch, and a laugh that could chase away the deepest winter. Their meetings were snatched moments, hurried glances across a crowded salon, whispered words exchanged in the fleeting anonymity of a shadowed calli, clandestine rendezvous in a secluded garden when the moon was a mere sliver in the velvet sky. Each description was imbued with a yearning so palpable it seemed to emanate from the very pages, a testament to the intensity of a love forced to exist in the margins. Elara found herself becoming an active participant in this historical drama, a silent witness to a passion that defied societal constraints. As she meticulously cleaned the layers of grime from a nobleman's ruff in a portrait, her mind would drift to Beatrice's eloquent descriptions of stifling courtly etiquette. While she carefully reconstructed a chipped gilded frame, she would muse on the fragile boundaries that separated Beatrice and Lorenzo's worlds. The empathy she felt for Beatrice was profound, a recognition of the universal human yearning for connection, for a love that transcends the barriers of circumstance. She imagined the terror and exhilaration of such a forbidden affair, the exquisite agony of longing, the fleeting joy of stolen moments. The Venetian winter outside, with its stark, muted beauty, served as a poignant counterpoint to the vibrant, passionate world unfolding within the diary's pages. The quiet solitude of the palazzo, rather than fostering isolation, seemed to magnify the emotional resonance of Beatrice's story, allowing it to unfurl with an almost cinematic clarity in Elara's mind. One particularly poignant entry described a secret meeting in the snow, a memory that resonated deeply with Elara's current surroundings. Beatrice recounted slipping away under the cover of a rare, heavy snowfall, her footsteps muffled by the pristine white carpet, to meet Lorenzo on a deserted bridge. The world was hushed, Beatrice had written, a symphony of silence, save for the beating of our own hearts. His breath, a phantom mist in the frigid air, mingled with mine. In that moment, surrounded by the silent majesty of the snow-laden city, the world dissolved, and there was only us, two souls illuminated by the soft, ethereal glow of the falling flakes. Reading this, Elara felt a shiver, not of cold, but of recognition. The very air in the palazzo seemed to thicken with the ghosts of their love, the memory of their stolen moment imbued with an almost tangible presence. She looked out of the tall windows, across the snow-covered rooftops, and saw a reflection of Beatrice's world in her own, a shared intimacy with the quiet, transformative power of the snow. The practicalities of her restoration work continued, of course, a grounding force amidst the ethereal echoes of the past. She established a precise rhythm, early mornings dedicated to the more intricate details of the paintings, the delicate removal of old varnish, the painstaking consolidation of flaking paint. The afternoons were often spent mixing pigments, preparing new canvases for touch-ups, or meticulously documenting her progress in her own detailed logbooks. But always, woven into the fabric of her day, were the precious moments spent with Beatrice's diary. She would often take it to the grand salon, seating herself by a tall window that offered a view of the snow-covered garden, the muted light illuminating the fragile pages. The act of reading became an almost meditative practice, a slow, deliberate immersion in a world that was both intimately familiar and profoundly alien. The deeper she delved into the diary, the more complex and nuanced Beatrice's world became. She learned of the societal pressures exerted upon young women of Beatrice's class, the arranged marriages, the expectations of decorum and obedience. These details underscored the immense courage and risk inherent in Beatrice's love for Lorenzo, highlighting the profound emotional cost of defying societal norms. Elara began to piece together the broader tapestry of Venetian life in that distant century, not from academic texts, but from the intimate, unfiltered perspective of a young woman experiencing it firsthand. The diary was not merely a chronicle of romance, it was a social commentary, a subtle critique of a world that valued appearance over genuine affection, duty over desire. One afternoon, while meticulously cleaning the intricate lace collar of a portrait of an austere-looking nobleman, Elara discovered a faint, almost invisible inscription hidden beneath layers of repaint. It was a single, stylized initial, L. Her breath hitched. Could it be? Was this portrait, a figure of authority and rigid formality, somehow connected to Lorenzo? The coincidence felt too potent to dismiss. She immediately turned to the diary, searching for any mention of the man depicted in the painting, a man who, by his attire, seemed to hold a position of some power within the Venetian elite. Beatrice's entries, however, offered no direct confirmation, only veiled allusions to the men who populated her world. Yet, the possibility ignited a new spark of curiosity, a desire to bridge the gap between the tangible art and the ethereal story, to find concrete connections between the painted faces and the whispered names. The quest to identify Lorenzo, or at least to understand his true identity and connection to Beatrice, became a silent obsession. Elara found herself scrutinizing every male portrait in the collection, searching for a subtle clue, a fleeting resemblance to the man Beatrice described with such fervent affection. She began to notice recurring motifs in Beatrice's writing, a specific kind of flower, a particular melody, a nuanced reference to a part of the city. These details, initially dismissed as mere embellishments, now seemed like breadcrumbs, leading her closer to the truth. The act of restoration was no longer simply about preserving the past. It was about unearthing it, understanding its hidden currents, its untold stories. The palazzo, in its profound stillness, became a silent accomplice in her quest, its ancient walls seemingly holding their breath as she peeled back the layers of time. The relentless snow outside had transformed the city into a landscape of dreams. Every bridge, every gondola, every intricate carving on the facades of the palazzi was softened, rounded, by the pristine white blanket. The light, filtered through the thick cloud cover, was a pearly luminescence, casting the entire city in a soft, ethereal glow. This constant, unyielding snowfall contributed to the pervasive sense of being suspended in time, of being an observer in a world entirely separate from the one she had left behind in Florence. It felt as though Venice itself was conspiring with the diary, creating the perfect atmosphere for the unveiling of its hidden romantic narrative. The isolation, rather than feeling oppressive, felt liberating, allowing Elara to fully immerse herself in the delicate tapestry of Beatrice's life and love. The line between observer and participant blurred further with each passing day, each turned page, each brushstroke that brought an old master's face back to vivid life. She was no longer just a restorer, she was a witness, a confidant, and a keeper of secrets from a world long past. The relentless, shimmering curtain of snow outside the palazzo continued its silent descent, transforming Venice into a singular, hushed entity. This unbroken spell of winter magnified the internal drama unfolding within Elara's world, deepening the sense of an exquisite, private stage upon which the echoes of Beatrice and Lorenzo's love played out. The very air, thick with the crystalline silence of the falling flakes, seemed to amplify the whispers from the past, each turn of the diary's fragile pages resonating with a heightened significance. Elara's days now consisted of an almost seamless dance between the careful, deliberate work of restoration and the immersive, emotional journey into Beatrice's heart. The two pursuits, once distinct, had begun to merge, forming an intricate braid of discovery. The breakthrough, when it came, was as subtle and profound as the first hint of dawn. While painstakingly cleaning the background of a large, imposing portrait, a scene depicting a bustling Venetian market, a rare departure from the somber portraiture of the collection, Elara noticed a small, almost imperceptible detail. Tucked away amidst the vibrant chaos of the market stalls, barely visible beneath centuries of grime and discolored varnish, was a tiny, meticulously painted miniature of a specific flower, a campanula, or bellflower, a delicate bloom with petals the color of twilight. Her breath hitched. She recalled Beatrice's diary, specifically an entry where she passionately described a gift from Lorenzo. A single bellflower, plucked from a hidden corner, a symbol of our quiet defiance, its fragile beauty a testament to the strength of our secret. The connection was undeniable, a vibrant thread stretching across 200 years. This was more than a mere coincidence, it was a deliberate, hidden message, a silent testament placed within the public gaze of the painting itself. Someone, likely Beatrice, had conspired to embed this intimate detail within the very fabric of the Palazzo's collection, a clandestine message encoded within the brushstrokes. Elara's heart quickened. She now understood that these paintings were not merely static objects of beauty, they were narrative vessels, silent conspirators in a love story that had defied time. The thought sent a thrilling shiver through her. What other secrets lay hidden within these canvases, waiting for her discerning eye to reveal them? The hunt for such hidden symbols became an exhilarating dimension of her work, transforming each restoration session into an archaeological dig of emotional truth. With newfound intensity, Elara re-examined every portrait, every landscape, every still life in the collection. Her gaze, already keen, sharpened to an almost predatory focus, searching for patterns, for recurring motifs, for any deviation that might signal a coded message. She looked for specific colors, unique arrangements of objects, subtle shifts in posture or gaze that might hint at a deeper, personal meaning. The work became a meditative puzzle, a quiet dialogue with the artists and, more importantly, with the silent protagonists of Beatrice's tale. The snow outside continued to fall, wrapping the city in its sound-absorbing blanket, creating a perfect sanctuary for this deep, introspective quest. Then, in a less prominent, almost overlooked portrait of a young man, a figure that had initially seemed unremarkable, she found it. The subject was dressed simply, in the attire of a craftsman or a scholar, his face possessing an open, intelligent quality, his eyes alight with a gentle intensity. On his left hand, subtly yet unmistakably painted, was a signet ring, its design almost indistinguishable due to the darkening of the paint. But as Elara meticulously cleaned the area, revealing the underlying detail, the crest on the ring slowly emerged. It was a stylized lion rampant, not the familiar, regal Venetian lion, but a more ancient, almost archaic depiction, entwined with a delicate, intertwining vine. The same lion that sealed the letter from the Countess. The same lion she had seen subtly etched into a piece of furniture in a corner of the palazzo. And then, a gasp escaped her lips. Beneath the lion, almost invisible to the naked eye, a tiny, almost microscopic L was woven into the vine. A wave of profound realization washed over Elara. This was Lorenzo. This unassuming portrait, tucked away in a quiet corridor, was a depiction of the man Beatrice loved, likely painted by an artist of lesser renown, commissioned in secret, away from the official family collection. And the presence of the lion rampant, so similar to the Countess's seal, sparked a daring hypothesis. Could Lorenzo be an ancestor of the very family who owned the palazzo now? Could the Countess herself be a descendant, and perhaps, unknowingly, the keeper of this untold story? The implications were staggering, transforming a simple restoration job into a direct connection to a deeply personal history. The diary, the paintings, the palazzo itself, they were all threads in the same intricate tapestry, waiting for her to weave them back into a coherent narrative. The revelation propelled Elara into a renewed study of the diary, searching for any further clues about Lorenzo's family or his connection to the palazzo. Beatrice's entries, though guarded, now yielded new meanings, small, previously overlooked details taking on immense significance. She discovered subtle hints of Lorenzo's family history, references to their trade as master glassblowers, a respected but not aristocratic profession, and their long-standing, albeit distant, connection to the noble family of the palazzo through generations of patronage. The lion rampant, she surmised, was not a noble crest, but the ancient symbol of his family's guild, a mark of their artistry and skill, subtly woven into the design to represent a bond deeper than status. The snow, which had been a constant companion, now seemed to press in, creating an atmosphere of intense concentration. Elara worked late into the nights, the only sound the faint scratching of her tools and the turning of pages, occasionally punctuated by the mournful hoot of an owl from the snow-laden cypress trees outside. The warmth of the old palazzo, heated by an ancient, whispering furnace, provided a comforting cocoon against the frigid world, allowing her to lose herself entirely in the intricate dance between art and narrative. She felt an overwhelming urge to bring this story to light, to give voice to Beatrice and Lorenzo, whose love had been condemned to silence for so long. The ultimate puzzle piece, however, came from the most unexpected source, the portrait of the young woman with the startlingly intense eyes, the very painting that had yielded the diary. As Elara completed the final stages of its restoration, removing the last vestiges of darkened varnish, she noticed a faint, almost transparent layer of pigment beneath the surface of the painting itself, a hidden detail revealed only through the slow, meticulous process of her work. It was a small, almost invisible inscription, etched delicately into the initial layers of paint, B+L. And below it, a single date, subtly interwoven into a barely discernible pattern in the background fabric, a date that confirmed the love had endured, and perhaps even thrived, beyond the expectations of their rigid society, extending years beyond the final entry in Beatrice's diary. This was the culmination, the undeniable proof. The painting was not just a portrait, it was a declaration, a silent testament to a love that had defied time and convention. It was a secret portrait of Beatrice herself, perhaps commissioned by Lorenzo, or even painted by an artist in their shared confidence, an intimate depiction meant only for their eyes, later disguised or repainted to blend into the larger collection. The original work on the painting had been subtle, almost imperceptible, designed to hide in plain sight. This was their final message, a whisper across centuries, confirming their enduring bond. The thought brought a lump to Elara's throat, a profound sense of awe at the enduring power of human connection, even in the face of such profound obstacles. The palazzo, quiet and ancient, seemed to sigh around her, its secrets finally brought to light, its echoes given a voice. The snow outside intensified, falling in large, silent flakes, as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging the revelation of this enduring love story. The revelation of Beatrice and Lorenzo's secret, etched not only in the fragile pages of a diary but also in the very fabric of the artworks themselves, settled upon Elara with a profound sense of completion. It was as if a long-held breath, suspended across centuries, had finally been released into the hushed air of the palazzo. The final brushstrokes she applied to the last of the portraits were imbued with a new purpose, not merely the technical act of restoration, but a tender laying to rest of a story, allowing its beauty to emerge without the burden of its secrets. The pervasive silence of the snow-covered city outside now felt less like a veil and more like an embrace, a gentle confirmation of the enduring power of the unspoken, the unseen, the deeply felt. The snow, which had been a constant companion throughout her stay, finally began to relent. A subtle shift in the pearly light filtering through the tall windows heralded the change. The heavy, unyielding blanket began to thin, revealing glimpses of the ancient stone beneath, the muted colors of brick and plaster peeking through the melting white. It was a gradual awakening, a slow reassertion of the city's inherent vibrancy, a gentle echo of the way Beatrice and Lorenzo's story had slowly, patiently, re-emerged from the layers of time. Elara spent her final days in the palazzo not just completing her professional duties, but also performing a kind of silent valediction, a farewell to the spectral presences that had become her intimate companions. She walked the echoing halls, touching the cool stone, gazing out at the canals now stirring faintly with the first signs of melting ice, her heart filled with a quiet sense of gratitude for the profound gift she had been given. Her final encounter with the Countess was brief, yet remarkably poignant. The elderly woman, her eyes still sharp with an uncanny perception, surveyed the restored portraits with a quiet intensity. There was no grand pronouncement, no effusive praise, merely a slow, almost imperceptible nod of approval. But as her gaze lingered on the portrait of Beatrice, the one that had held the diary and now bore the subtle, hidden mark of B+L, a flicker of something undefinable crossed the Countess's face, a shadow of recognition, perhaps, or a faint, ancestral echo of understanding. She said simply, "They breathe again, Signorina. You have given them back their essence." Her words, delivered in that silken voice, resonated with a deeper meaning for Elara, confirming that the Countess, perhaps intuitively, understood the unspoken stories now revealed. Elara, in turn, offered a small, knowing smile, a shared secret passing between them without the need for words. She chose not to reveal the diary's contents, understanding that some secrets, once brought to light, are best kept within the quiet sanctuary of the heart, shared only with those who truly listen to the whispers of the past. The art now spoke for itself, carrying its own silent narrative. Packing her modest suitcase, Elara felt a peculiar lightness, as if a weight, unacknowledged until now, had been lifted from her spirit. The solitude, which had initially been a balm, had transformed into a profound communion, allowing her to connect not only with a bygone era but also with a deeper part of herself. She realized that the search for forgotten beauty in art was, in essence, a search for enduring truths about the human condition, love, loss, longing, and the persistent whisper of hope that transcends even the most rigid of societal barriers. Beatrice and Lorenzo's story had underscored the universality of these emotions, reminding her that even in the most quiet and hidden corners of history, profound passions could bloom and leave an indelible mark. The beauty of their enduring affection, revealed through a diary and hidden symbols in paintings, had imparted a gentle lesson on the timeless nature of connection. The journey away from Venice was a reverse image of her arrival, yet profoundly different in its emotional resonance. The water taxi glided over canals that were now mostly free of ice, reflecting a sky that was slowly shedding its gray winter cloak, hinting at the pale, hopeful blue of an emerging spring. The city, though still quiet compared to its usual bustling self, felt subtly reawakened, its ancient stones now bathed in a softer, more forgiving light. As the taxi moved away from the palazzo, Elara cast a final glance back at its unassuming facade, a silent farewell to the house that had been her sanctuary, her classroom, and her confidant. She knew she was leaving a part of herself within its walls, just as she was carrying a part of its profound silence and rich history within her own soul. As the train pulled away from the Venetian station, carrying her back towards the familiar landscapes of Florence, Elara did not feel the customary ache of departure. Instead, there was a quiet sense of fulfillment, a profound peace that settled over her like a gentle shroud. The world outside her window, though gradually becoming more defined, more familiar, was still imbued with the ethereal quality of the preceding weeks. The image of Venice, hushed and pristine beneath its blanket of snow, remained vivid in her mind, a powerful symbol of beauty rediscovered, of silence made eloquent, of love enduring through time. Her time in the Palazzo d'Inverno, a period of profound introspection and unexpected discovery, had subtly but irrevocably altered the landscape of her inner world. She had arrived seeking a deeper quietude, and she had found it, but she had also unearthed a vibrant narrative that spoke of passion, courage, and the indelible marks left by human connection. The story of Beatrice and Lorenzo, now woven into the very fabric of her being, served as a quiet reminder that even in the most silent corners of the world, and within the most fragile relics of the past, the most compelling stories of love and resilience patiently await discovery, ready to echo across centuries if only one has the patience, and the gentle touch, to listen. Elara, the restorer of forgotten beauty, carried not just the satisfaction of a job impeccably done, but the quiet, luminous glow of a profound story silently shared, a love that had whispered itself into existence on a bed of snow in a timeless city.